Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Molly McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today is really interesting in that he actually invented a product to help grapple with the problem of a racing mind when we are trying to do everything but have our mind race and actually get some sleep. So I want to give you a little bit of background on this product because what's interesting about it is that it speaks to a larger topic, which is this idea that our thoughts are so powerful, and to the point that there's actually an impact on the type of thoughts that we are having and the speed at which we are having them, and that it actually can cause our brain to literally heat up. So this product is meant and designed to cool down the brain from those own, self-created racing thoughts. So let's hear a little bit more about him. Now, Dr. Eric Nofzinger invented Ebb and Ebb is the product, by the way, based on research he performed as a professor of psychiatry and director of the Sleep Neuroimaging Research Program at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, a renowned expert in the science of sleep and a past president of the Sleep Research Society. He has spent more than 35 years practicing sleep medicine and studying the brain mechanisms of healthy sleep and sleeplessness. At the university, his work defined the precise area of the forehead coverage and precision therapeutic temperatures that make Ebb the successful product it is today. Dr. Nofzinger takes an active role in the leadership of the company, including the development of its first behavioral therapy program. Eric earned his BA degrees in chemistry and psychology from Miami University, his MD degree from the Ohio State University College of Medicine, and performed his psychiatry training at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. All right, and welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. I am so excited to have my guest here today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm always excited to have an opportunity to talk about sleep and how to help people get a better night's sleep.
Oh, awesome. You're preaching my language. I love it. And we got to speak a little bit before we began recording. And, one of the things that I mentioned to you that I can't wait to hear more about is how you got into taking the leap to create a company like this, that every time I mention your product to different clients or just in passing, that there actually is a product like this out there in the market. I am always left with, wait, what, how does that work? Why on the head? Why, a lot of questions, right? So I would love to give you the opportunity and the platform to go in deeper as to how that came to be, and then we can get into the nuances of why that can be effective for our sleep.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to start off at square one. It really goes back quite a long ways. I've pretty much spent my entire adult life and my entire career in the quest of trying to understand more about sleep, the mysteries of sleep, how sleep works, what it is about sleep that makes us feel good in the daytime, and then what it is about disturbed sleep that gives people problems. A little bit about my background. I'm trained as a psychiatrist at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, where I did my residency. And even early in my residency, I was very interested in the topic of sleep research, and primarily because we know that individuals who have mental disorders of one type or another, if they have a mood disorder, a depression, an anxiety disorder, pretty much most all mental disorders can impact sleep to one degree or another at nighttime. So we know that if people are suffering emotionally, mentally during the daytime, that tends to have a carryover effect into what's happening throughout the nighttime. And their sleep can be disrupted in very, very characteristic ways. So my early career was really focused on understanding the relationships between how we sleep at nighttime and then how we feel during the daytime and how we're able to perform during the daytime and the relationships between that. It became very apparent early on that there's something mysterious or important or magical that takes place as we lay our heads down at nighttime and drift off and go through 7 or 8 hours of sleep at nighttime. There's something that's happening during that time that's very critical to how we feel the next day and how we're able to perform. So my early career was focused on using some of the traditional techniques in sleep research at that time, and that was looking at the polysomnogram. The polysomnogram is hooking up a bunch of electrodes to an individual and watching brain waves as they change across the nighttime. Those studies reveal that there are very, very reliable changes in EEG sleep patterns that define the different stages of sleep across the nighttime. And we know that some of those stages are lighter stages, some are deeper stages, and some are stages, for example, rapid eye movement or REM sleep at nighttime, that are most typically associated with the wonderful, magical dream sequences that all of us experience at nighttime. So we looked at a lot of those studies, thousands and thousands of studies in healthy individuals, and then also in individuals who had a variety of different mental disorders, be it a mood disorder, depression, and anxiety disorder. And we found very characteristic disruptions in individuals with a variety of mental disorders. But something still was kind of lacking in those early studies. The surface EEG gives us some understanding of the basic stages of sleep, but it really doesn't help us to understand what's going on inside the brain as we're sleeping at nighttime. So kind of the second phase of my career was devoted to the development of functional brain imaging techniques, PET scans, for example, in which we were really able to take moving pictures, snapshots of different regions of the brain across the nighttime to see what part of the brain was producing those things that lead to restorative sleep as well as disrupted sleep at nighttime. And it became apparent that there's a very, very well coordinated, if you will, symphony of activity amongst different brain regions that is needed in order to produce a good, healthy, restorative night of sleep. For example, we know that when people go to sleep at nighttime, there are dramatic reductions in overall brain activity. When we go into deep sleep, for example, there's about a 20% reduction in global metabolic activity across the brain, less than what is happening when we're awake. So there's something very, very important about sleep in which the brain is resting or restoring function. And then when we look at a regional level in the brain, there's an area of the brain, the frontal cortex, our executive brain, in which there's a striking reduction in metabolic activity, and it correlates with the depth of sleep at nighttime. So the more our frontal cortex in the front of our brain is able to have a reduction in activity, the more likely it is that we're able to have a deep restorative night of sleep. So again, the second phase of my career was devoted to understanding the various brain mechanisms that produce the deep sleep states. In the background, I had a clinical practice, and I was a sleep medicine physician in addition to a psychiatrist. And my job in the clinic was to sit across the room from someone who had a profound sleep problem. Doc, I can't sleep at nighttime. And I talked with thousands of patients trying to understand the different problems that they had, how it impacted and impaired their lives across the daytime, and then what were some of the treatment modalities that they were using and what was available in medicine at that point in time. Learned a lot over the course of that process. And the various treatments that were available, say 10, 15, 20 years or so ago, came in kind of two forms. One was medication management, and those are the traditional sleeping pills, if you will, all the way back to things like Valium and Dalmane and Restoril, Halcyon, up to some of the newer hypnotic medications like Ambien, Lunesta, for example. Those medications are, if you will, almost like anesthetic-like medications. The purpose of those medications is to kind of render the brain unconscious. Not unlike if you were putting somebody under anesthesia. The problem with some of those medications, according to some of the patients, and then the FDA eventually began to recognize this, is that they do have, unfortunately, some adverse events that are uncomfortable and unsafe for people. For example, daytime sedation is particularly problematic with hypnotics that tend to last too long. Drowsy driving, for example, impaired function during the daytime because people are still under the influence of these medications, was known to be a particular concern. They can also be habit forming. People, when they get on these medications, have a difficult time getting off of them. They tend to become psychologically dependent on taking these medications. They can impair memory formation. They can impair gait and coordination and balance. They can cause confusional arousals across the nighttime. So unfortunately, even though they have demonstrated effectiveness, they were also associated with kind of impairing and having some adverse events. So that there clearly was an opportunity or a need, if you will, in the clinical management of people that had trouble sleeping at nighttime for a safer alternative means for treating sleep problems. So that's kind of where Ebb and the technology came in. It was really understanding that we had a kind of a conflict or a problem in the traditional medical management of sleep problems. You have this tremendous need on the one hand. Probably half of the individuals in the United States have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or impaired ability to function during the daytime because they're not sleeping well at nighttime. So a huge public health problem, lots of people with this medical disorder. And yet the treatments were still somewhat lacking. There was a need for a new solution. So going back to the drawing board, if you will, I looked at the research that I had done on the brain mechanisms of sleep and started doing studies in individuals with insomnia and sleeplessness. And I found in those individuals that unlike in healthy restorative sleep, the frontal cortex, the higher order cortex, higher order levels of the brain in those individuals, they just weren't able to get those parts of the brain to settle down. And that was consistent with their clinical complaints that, Doc, my mind is just racing, my head hits the pillow, but my mind keeps going. It should settle down. I should be able to go to sleep. I should be able to turn off my brain at nighttime, but that just doesn't happen. It just keeps working. Or if they wake up in the middle of the night, they'll often complain that, Doc, I just can't get back to sleep because my mind just keeps going. There's something inside. I think there's something wrong with me. And indeed, the functional brain imaging studies suggested that there was at least a physiological or a biological basis for some of the things that they were thinking about. Yes, indeed, their brain did continue to work too hard, and especially in the frontal cortex, our executive mind, our thinking mind, that part of the brain just wasn't settling down at nighttime. So the discovery, if you will, was trying to think about, is there some way we can kind of help that part of the brain to settle down? Going back in my medical career, I realized that cooling brain tissue was one way that other areas of medicine had used to alter brain function or to protect brain tissue, if you will. For example, if somebody had a traumatic brain injury, or if somebody had a stroke, for example, and a neurologist or an emergency medicine physician wanted to protect brain tissue, they would cool the brain to a certain degree to reduce activity and have a neuroprotective effect. So I knew on some level that cooling could potentially be a way of simply and safely modulating brain function in a specific region. And potentially that could be helpful in individuals with insomnia, for example. So the first studies that we did were imaging studies where we had a forehead cooling device placed over the forehead just to see if we could alter metabolic activity in the underlying brain tissue. And PET scans, brain imaging studies revealed that yes, indeed, we were able to put something very simple, a cooling pad over the forehead, and that did reduce metabolic activity in the underlying brain tissue. When we did that in individuals with insomnia, there was kind of an aha moment of some of these patients. They reported to me that, doc, I haven't slept like that in a long time. And many of them said that, it was a deeper, more restorative sleep than I'd been able to get for a long time. I did feel that my brain was able to kind of relax or settle down, and I didn't have those arousals or awakenings across the nighttime like I usually do. So I knew at that point in time that we were kind of on to something that could potentially be beneficial. A few years later, after some testing, different temperatures, different flow rates, different mechanisms, we found kind of the sweet spot, if you will. We found the precise temperature range that was helpful in producing a desired effect, didn't produce any side effects, and was comfortable for people to wear across the nighttime. So that was really the development of the technique itself. It came from a long history of an interest in sleep and producing restorative sleep, a very basic understanding of the brain mechanisms of sleep that were brought about by functional neuroimaging studies, and then recognition of the clinical need. What is the need within the medical community or within the patient population for an alternative solution? So with that, Ebb was born, and we were off to the races at that point in time.
Wow, what an evolution. That was a wonderful job of kind of painting the picture of how your experience of then filling in the blanks of this real need that is missing. I love I was taking notes as you were speaking. And I love some of the things that you pointed out about what seems to be missing currently as far as our approach to how to deal with these problems when people are, really complaining of a very common problem of this, hyper-aroused brain state and this inability to turn off their brain, and yet so exhausted and just often wanting nothing more than to sleep, but having this tired but wired experience. And the concept of being able to fill in those gaps, on my own personal experience and personal journey with my sleep, part of my story is that I went through a period of insomnia for about 3 months that I had never dealt with before. And it was a very scary time because, I went to the doctors and I was given, I was actually traveling at the time. So I went to Croatia and I was in Croatia. I went to the doctors there, and what they gave me was basically their version of Ambien. And the experience for me was, this can't be the only option. How are there not other things we can do here? And the concept of what you're really standing for and creating is really exciting. So I was wondering if, because you said a lot there and it was wonderful. So I'm wondering if we could even further underscore this connection between temperature and sleep. We talk a lot about that here at Sleep is a Skill with this, concept of circadian rhythm entrainment and the cues that we get from our external temperature, but also the things that we're doing, the behaviors that we're partaking in, whether it has to do with, exercise, meal timing, even arguably thought timing, all these things that can warm up or cool down the body strategically at different points throughout the day. So I'd love to hear more about, just this concept of temperature and sleep, because a lot of people it seems to be a new concept of why that plays such a crucial role.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. So you're absolutely right that our temperature regulation, our thermal regulation in the body is very much connected with our sleep-wake cycle. The body has rhythms. And that's, I guess, one of the novelties that the field of sleep and circadian rhythms has brought to our understanding of just basic human physiology, is that there's a rhythmic occurrence to lots of things in the body. Body temperature, core body temperature is probably the most pronounced body rhythm, where our overall body temperature fluctuates about 1 degree centigrade across the daytime. It's not a constant thing, and it's highly regulated in relationship to what's happening throughout the daytime and then at nighttime as well. More specifically, body temperature tends to be higher throughout the daytime. And then in the evening, as the body is starting to settle down close to the sleep period, within about a half an hour, an hour prior to falling asleep, there is a very pronounced drop-off in body temperature. It's like body temperature hits a cliff. And once that cliff is reached and body temperature starts to drop, then people start to have this sensation of sleepiness that starts to come over them. So the drop in core body temperature, along with the melatonin rhythm and some other rhythms, is one of the key signature events, signaling kind of that flip-flop switch, if you will, from wakefulness to transition into the sleep period. And core body temperature, their body temperature is regulated in a couple of different ways. There's our core, which is like the temperature in our core organs, our heart, our stomach, our core body. And then there's peripheral temperature, peripheral meaning our fingertips, our toes, our feet, our hands, our legs. That's temperature in the peripherally. And there's a shift across the daytime as we go to sleep at nighttime. And actually, the core body temperature is dropping, but now the heat in the body is shunted out to the periphery, and so there's a dissipation of heat through the hands, the feet at nighttime. The head seems to be part of the core body and thermal regulation. So it's certainly possible that the application of a cooling pad, like what we're doing with the Ebb technology, is helping with the drop-off in core body temperature that might signal the onset of sleep. So reduction in metabolic activity in the frontal cortex maybe an acceleration of that drop in core body temperature could be part of the mechanism of action, if you will, for the use of the device. Just to give a couple of clinical vignettes, I distinctly remember there's one woman with insomnia in one of our research studies, had really bad insomnia, couldn't sleep at nighttime, and she was going back in her history, and she said, the only time I really remember sleeping well, I was on a cruise, and this was a cruise. It was an Alaskan cruise. So it was going from Vancouver up to Anchorage. Beautiful, beautiful scenery, but it's cold outside, right? And so she's in her room inside this cruise ship, can't sleep, frustrated, tossing and turning, doesn't know what to do. She goes outside of her room, goes out onto the deck, and she finds a bench. And she has her blanket with her. She covers her body with the blanket, but her head is exposed to the coolness of the night air. And she said there was something about, having my head, starting to cool, and it was probably 40, 50 degrees or so outside, that helped her actually get to sleep at nighttime and get into a deeper sleep. So she kind of likened her experience with the Ebb technology to a positive kind of experience that she had in her own life on that cruise. So very important relationships between thermoregulation, energy metabolism, and sleep, and preservation of energy across the nighttime.
Wow, so interesting. And I love that, that kind of real life visual of how that can work, just in the practicality of it, how we can see that in action for people. And, because it also makes me think too of some correlations with, people with chronic migraines and headaches, and some of these tests with being able to cool these cooling caps and ways to help kind of calm, presumably the brain, but also just in that tactile experience too, for people just to be able to cool that whole process down, and how that can relate to also their ability to sleep at night when they are struck with these, headaches and migraines, just as an aside. So really interesting. So you had this whole wealth of knowledge, and you had, gotten in there and really been testing this out. And then you decide to make this maybe a prototype at the beginning, and you start to then test out to see the efficacy of this. And what began to come out from this, as far as the process that you would start to see? So people would begin to comment on the difference. Were you able to conduct different studies on this? Was it, by getting out the product itself and then getting the customer feedback? How have you been able to collect that data since then, as you've dove into this deeper?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we like to think that one of the strengths of our company and our product and this technology is the extensive kind of scientific research and clinical trials that we've done, demonstrating what the device actually does. So even before getting into the market, we made a conscious decision to seek FDA clearance of the device. And when you go to seek FDA clearance, the FDA has very rigorous guidelines on what they require to show in terms of efficacy and safety measures. And basically, you need to do a randomized controlled clinical trial. So the first probably 4 to 5 years after we had a device that we could use in the clinic was running multi-center clinical research trials in research centers that were sleep research centers. These are places that were very familiar with studying insomnia patients using polysomnograph recording techniques. So we had, over the course of 4, 5, 6 years or so, we had about 5 different clinical trials that we had done, studying various aspects of the device on polysomnographic measures of sleep at nighttime. And what we found was that the device was helpful in helping people to get to sleep quicker and get into a deeper sleep more quickly. We followed that up with kind of subjective, qualitative assessments of the device and found that longer term use of the device over a 30-day period of time, people using it in their homes, they did report improvements in sleep quality. They reported improvements in their mood alertness when they woke up when using the device. And they also reported that they felt like they were falling asleep and that they were staying asleep longer across the nighttime. So those initial trials, very rigorously controlled clinical trials, were submitted to the FDA. They had a scientific panel that they put together, reviewed all of the information, and gave the device FDA clearance. Since we did that, we've also conducted some post-market research studies in a variety of clinical populations. And we're very excited about the trial results from those. We looked at a population of menopausal women, for example, who had hot flashes at nighttime. And we found improvements in their ability to get to sleep, improvements in their ability to stay asleep. We also found that they had reductions in their hot flash frequency at nighttime, not only at nighttime, but also during the daytime. There were statistically significant improvements over baseline in the hot flashes that they experienced during the daytime. So we were very excited about that, and many of them had just wonderful responses to the use of the device. Another population that we studied was in veterans who had significant comorbid medical problems as well as psychiatric problems such as PTSD. And there we were pleased to find that they had improvements in their ability to get to sleep, stay asleep across the nighttime, as well as improvements in some of their daytime anxiety symptoms over the month that they were using the device. These data sets will all be presented this spring at an upcoming meeting of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society. So we'll be excited to share the results of those to the public at that time.
Wow, that's so exciting. And it really just, for me and, so many of the clients that I work with, the menopausal women group, so when we're dealing with women 40 and over, usually going in through that period, whether it's perimenopause or menopause, or even then just some, kind of new link-ups between their relationship to sleep post-menopause, there can be a real sense of frustration and upset and, just a confusion as far as the direction to take, and a weariness of, they might be being suggested to go on hormonal replacement therapies and, different possibilities for them and different paths. And by having the opportunity to then have something else that really, it feels as if it speaks back to something more simple and yet profound with this relationship to our body, or these rhythms that we maybe arguably, thousands of years ago were doing more naturally and just based out of, a whole series of problems, just even behaviorally, but then, it's very layered, that there may be more and more challenges for ourselves of how to, have a healthy connection with that. And you standing as a company to provide something to fill that gap is really, really exciting. The other thing that you did make me think of too is a lot of my clients that fall even into the 50 or even 60 and over category that are having difficulties with their sleep. I do have a lot of people that come in and they have been given, many, many years ago, different ways of dealing with their sleep, based on from a pharmacological perspective. So they might be having like Xanax at night and all these different things, and not really connected to what that can be doing to impact the quality of their sleep. So I really do appreciate that you touched a little bit about, what that can be doing to our sleep architecture, but then even just the fallout of the following day and the impact. Whereas something like this, it's natural, largely it's dealing with temperature and seemingly no real side effects, and the efficacy seems to be something that, has a lot of promise and potential and on the ground results. So really exciting. And I'd love for you to now, be able to speak a little bit more about the iterations of this product, what it looks like. And, I know I got to see you guys at CES of, some of the unveilings of some new, models. So just curious to hear more about what the latest is of how that's looking and how that would work for people.
Sure. Yeah. We're extremely proud of our engineering group. I can't say enough about them. These guys are really top notch. The skill set, the ability that they have to kind of envision what should happen, but to put it in the context of a sleeping environment. So the very skilled engineering group that has spent their careers developing products that people wear when they sleep at nighttime, and they brought that level of education to the design and build of our initial product. So our initial product, for those that are maybe not familiar with it, it's a couple of different components. One is a little bedside unit, about the size of a clock radio or so. That's the cooling unit that has the cooling engine in it, and then a little pump. It cools fluids and then circulates the fluids from a tube that goes from the device over to a forehead pad. It's just like a headband that's worn over the forehead, connects in the back of the head. It has some adjustable straps. Very comfortable. The engineering staff had lots of user interface trials, had a lot of people comment on the design, put a lot of energy and thought into making something that would be very comfortable. People could roll around in bed. It's not going to fall off. And I think they did just an outstanding job. So that's the product that we have available at this point in time in the market, and having a lot of success with that. But we do recognize that there are individuals that would prefer to have a device that's a little bit more portable. So for those individuals, the engineering staff has created a next generation called our Versa device. This is a device in which the cooling apparatus is actually built into the headband itself. So there's no bedside unit. It all just fits right on the forehead and then is strapped around in the back. Incredible job of human engineering, putting the cooling mechanism inside of a very soft fabric, flexible. It adjusts to different forehead shapes and sizes. If you're tossing and turning back in bed, it adjusts very comfortably to how someone is sleeping at nighttime. It's battery powered, and so there is a cord that goes to a little battery pack that you can adjust the temperature up and down with it. But very lightweight, very small in size, can be put in a little travel bag and thrown in a suitcase, taken on a trip if you want to be able to travel with the device. Or for those individuals that simply would like a more compact device in their home. People are kind of evenly split, if you will, between, kind of which one that they would prefer. It's nice to have options available for those individuals according to their own individual needs.
So cool. So yeah, because I got the opportunity to see both of them, and I can definitely see the benefits on either side. Yeah, it's exciting to see all the iterations and different stages that you guys are going through as you're creating this product. And I was curious too. So you have this unique situation where you get to see the shifts for people as they begin to wear some of these or to test these out, that you might be able to gain some more insight into the shift of the sleep architecture that people get to experience as they are, wearing these more regularly. Do you see like a real dramatic change in the layout of the architecture? So, it's making me think of a couple clients that I have had that are just really tend to go through these different changes in their temperature throughout the night. And some of them are wearing, certainly not a polysonogram, but they might be wearing the Dream headband to get a little bit of, to try to gain some level of information around their sleep stages with the EEG readouts. But, again, not a polysonogram, but they do seem to notice some, changes for themselves when they do play with the temperature that they are having just on a full environmental standpoint, really playing with the temperature in the whole room, but also some of the different products that are available, for on the mattress or different fans, different cooling items like that. But since yours is so targeted at the brain, do you get to see some real marked changes or, amplifications of certain stages throughout the night? What do you see with that?
Yeah, that's interesting question. I'm pausing a little bit because we could have I have a lot of thoughts about
yes, I'm sure.
sleep architecture and the different stages of sleep and what they all mean or don't mean.
Yeah.
And then there's another separate large conversation on the use of kind of many of the devices that are out in the lay community at this point in time that are in large part activity monitors. Some have some EEG base, but whether or not those are valid indicators of what's going on. So it's
definitely, yeah.
But having said that, if when we did our polysomnographic studies, our earliest studies showed, maybe not surprisingly, enhancements in slow wave activity. Slow wave activity is indicative of kind of deep restorative sleep. It's indicative of the deepest non-REM stages of sleep. It used to be called stages 3 and 4 sleep. Now it's referred to as stage 3 sleep. But at the EEG level, it's very high amplitude, slow rhythms where the brain is really slowing down. And that's kind of what you would expect, that in healthy individuals, those slow amplitude rhythms tend to occur when the brain has reductions in activity. So if we're inducing that with the use of a device, it makes sense that they would have an enhancement in that activity. Most of our kind of post-marketing studies, they're mostly subjective estimates based on diary estimates. So we don't have, all-night polysomnographic recordings in those types of studies. But if I were to say that there were any of those shifts, it might be in the direction of an enhancement of the slow waves. And then what that typically does then is it shifts the rapid eye movement sleep stages into later stages of the night. Kind of a normalizing, if you will, of the healthy sleep-wake pattern from the abnormal rhythms that might exist in somebody with insomnia. So I have lots of other thoughts in that, because my background is as a brain imaging researcher, and there are not always perfect correlations between what we see at the surface EEG level and what's happening at the underlying brain metabolic level. And over time, I became to trust and feel that what's happening in the brain is much more important than what's happening at the surface level. Unfortunately, we don't have inexpensive ways to measure. Not everybody in their home environment can do a brain imaging study on themselves. So,
right.
So that's a drawback of those techniques. But I do have a feeling that the device is enhancing kind of what we think of as the restorative kind of sleep architecture aspects, and especially an increasing, if you will, duration of all stages of sleep also across the nighttime.
And also beneficial too for people that have maybe they don't have the difficulty falling asleep, but they have frequent wake ups. This could also be a potential thing for them to test as well.
Yeah. So what we find there is, the vast majority of the people epidemiologically will have some difficulty with sleep continuity or difficulty maintaining sleep across the nighttime, and often intermixed with difficulties falling asleep. But at the broad population level, it's the awakenings across the nighttime, which is where a lot of the problem is. So with use of the device, people do report that they're getting more consolidated sleep, having fewer awakenings, fewer arousals across the nighttime. So that it has been a consistent kind of subjective finding that we've had in all of our studies. Along those lines, kind of the other unique feature of the device, and this puts it in a different camp than the sleeping pills. So with the sleeping pill, right, you ingest it. You put it in your mouth, it's in your body, and if you don't like the effects of it, you're out of luck.
Right.
It's there until it goes through its entire process. It goes through your body. It's going to be there, until it gets out of your system, and that can be, sometimes 8 to 10 hours later. With the use of this device, it's immediately on, immediately off. You put it on, it starts to have, efficacy within 5 to 10 minutes or so. You'll start to feel some of the effects of it. If you don't want to continue with the effects, you take it off, and the effects stop. So let's say an example would be somebody that doesn't have trouble falling asleep, but they have difficulties maintaining sleep across the nighttime. For those individuals, they find they don't necessarily need to put it on to help them get to sleep at nighttime. But if they do find that they're awake and their brain's going 100 miles an hour in the middle of the night, they can put the device on at that point in time, and it's immediately effective. And then when they wake up the next morning, it could be 2 hours later, 3 hours later, 4 hours, doesn't make any difference how long. As soon as they wake up, they take the device off, it stops working. Unlike with a sleeping pill, for example, if they woke up in the middle of the night, took a sleeping pill at that point in time, it might be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when they take the sleeping pill, and now all of a sudden, the sleeping pill is in their system till 11 o'clock or noon the next day. So again, it's much easier to tailor this to the personal needs of each individual and their own unique sleep problems.
Yeah, I feel like that it's just so important. It brings me back to when I was in my period with not being able to sleep and just was so desperate to, just get that sleep that I knew I needed and was craving, and oh my God. And my brain would then think about, should I take something? Okay, but then if I take something, then will it work? And then the hyper aroused state that would bring about. But to your point, then the fallout of the next day as well, and just sort of this vicious cycle. Whereas this feels distinct from that in that it allows and kind of puts you back in the driver's seat of taking control over this area of your life, and then, testing it out, take it off, but there's no real lasting ramifications that you're dealing with that bring about a whole other slew of problems. So really exciting stuff. So you've said so much, and I have this real sense that I could just go to town with even more and more things because you're just, a fascinating wealth of information on this topic. And so I'm wondering then, where can people learn more about your product, stay in touch with what you're doing, your findings, your research, what you're putting out, these new models? Let us know where they should go for that.
Sure. Yeah. So people can go to our website, www.tryebb.com is a good place to go. They can follow us on our Instagram and Facebook pages at Ebb Therapeutics. So in one of those places, you can provide your own contact information, and then you'll be able to receive any and all updates on the latest to the company, as well as any specials that we tend to run from time to time on, purchasing the device or finding out how the device works. And our website has a wealth of information on it as well, more information about the background of the device, descriptions of some of our clinical trials. And also we have links to a sleep coaching staff also that people can connect with if they want kind of more personalized information for their own, modifying their own behavior, their own sleep-wake routines. We have a coaching staff that can kind of help guide people through the process of not only how to use the device, but how to improve other aspects of their sleep to give them that quality sleep that they're really looking for.
So great. And you can also get that included when you purchase the product. There's the optionality, right, to get some of that coaching with the product in like a bundle. Okay, great. And it's Ebb, EBB. Why'd you call it Ebb, by the way? Just wanted to see if there's a background on that one.
Yeah, we actually had somebody help us try to identify branding as a whole art in and of itself.
Yes, sure.
So sleep is a rhythm, and
yes.
And so there, sleep comes and goes. So we wanted a name that kind of had a rhythmicity built into it, and the ebb and flow of the ocean, the tides that come in and out, is very consistent with kind of the process of sleep. You can imagine the ebb going out, and sleep in and of itself is kind of a rhythm where you relax and allow, kind of the pressures of the day to kind of recede off into the distance to allow you to get a deep restorative sleep at nighttime. So it has kind of that rhythm, natural rhythm component, and the ocean and the sea is the tides that come in and out is globally probably one of the most symbolic things of the natural rhythm of life, if you will.
Wow. Oh, I love that. That gives a whole new richness to that name. That's awesome. Well, such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I really encourage everyone to check out this product. It really can begin to fill some of the gaps of the actions or the potential actions that any of us can take if we are having difficulty with our sleep, and the ability to, bring about that ebb and flow in a more natural way. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I really enjoyed having a chance to talk with you.
Oh, me too. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day. You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Molly's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.